All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Trent, and welcome back to the Fireside Book Club podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about books. And yeah, we just have fun reading and we just try to spread the joy of reading. So that's the goal of the podcast. So I do appreciate you guys stopping by. And in today's episode, we are going to continue our book talk on Terry Pratchett's Going Postal. So we're going to be covering chapter 4 and 5. Now, I said I was going to do 3 chapters at a time. I think I'm going to slow it down to 2 chapters at a time because these chapters, they're pretty long and there's a lot going on. And I feel like if I do 3 at a time, there's going to be a lot that I'm going to miss for the story here. So I don't want to do that. I felt like, in the last episode, I felt like I kind of had a rush the podcast because there's just so much to cover. And also looking back, there's a lot of little details that I kind of missed on. I feel like that's just going to happen. I'm going to miss some things, retelling the story here and having the book talk. But yeah, we're going to slow it down to just 2 chapters. So if you've already read 3, if you already read chapter 6, that's okay. We'll get to that later. Just know that this is just for chapters 4 and 5. If you have not read chapters 4 and 5, you might want to pause the podcast, finish that, and then come back because obviously you don't want anything spoiled. But yeah, and then if you're not even reading the book, which some of you guys are, well, I guess you'll just have the book spoiled, I suppose, and maybe, I don't know, you could read it later or whatever. But yeah, before we jump into today's episode, I do want to say that we do have a special Halloween event going on right now. So it's actually a writing competition, I suppose. Not really, it's just for fun. But I asked you guys to write a 550 word or less scary story for a good campfire side story. We've gotten 2 submissions so far. So if you guys want to take part in that, I think we'll end it probably like the 28th. So 4 days from now, a little less than 4 days. So definitely write up some fun stories. The 2 that we've gotten are pretty deep and dark. So I wasn't expecting that. So that's pretty cool. I'm excited to read those, but I still have to write my story as well. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, don't miss out on that. And of course, the way you submit that is through the Discord. You either send it to me or an admin, and we'll have it uploaded once it's approved, because obviously the story has to be appropriate. Nothing too gory or disgusting. But yeah, send them our way. Join the Discord. It's linked in the YouTube video description, and you don't want to miss out. So yeah, here we go, guys. Let's go ahead and continue our book talk of Going Postal. So we're going to start with chapter 4, and I actually took notes this time. So I just kind of jotted little notes of things that I thought were interesting or major events in the chapter, because I actually just finished reading chapter 5, and that's a doozy of a chapter. There's a lot going on in the story. So anyways, here we go. Chapter 4, section 1. So in this chapter, we find a conversation between Lipwig and Groat, and he finds out about the previous postal masters that came before him and how they were all mysteriously found dead in the post office, which I found to be very interesting, because I was either thinking there's something in the post office, something or some kind of force in the post office that is committing these horrible murders and crimes. Yeah, so I think one fell down the stairs, one jumped off a ledge, and the other one was just found dead, and they said it was his heart. Now, all of these mysterious deaths are solved, sort of, I think, in chapter 5, which we'll get to that later. But yeah, that part was kind of eerie. I was like, oh my God, like this is kind of scary. Like, what is gonna happen? What is gonna happen? Now, they were all found dead, like in like further up, I think, in the post office. Like there's multiple stairs and layers, and there's letters everywhere. So I don't think that at this point Lipwig has gone up to see like what's up there. So that would be pretty fun to see. Well, in chapter 5 he goes up there, but again, we'll talk about that a little bit later in this episode. Yeah, they all died of mysterious causes. Stanley, remember Stanley is the strange young kid who works at the post office, but he like loves pins, and pins kind of keep him grounded. So like whenever he starts freaking out, the Groats or Mr. Lipwig or Moist is his first. Moist, what a name. He'll distract Stanley with like questions about pins, and that will calm him down. But yeah, he gets like physically scared. Like Lipwig can notice how scared he gets about this conversation, and he distracts him about saying he found a fancy pin in the street. Now, I found this conversation pretty interesting because Groat confronts him about this. So Groat, he mentions that where Moist found the pin, this like epic pin that's like a collector's edition, that there's no cobbles. So when Moist says, "Hey, I found this pin in the cobble street," just kind of was shining at me. That's where I found it. And then Groat goes, "There's no cobbles there. That's like a paved road." And he's like, "Cobbles, stone, paved, whatever. You got what I'm saying." So Groat was pretty like observant there, and I don't know. I don't know if that really means anything, but like I found that pretty interesting that he found that small detail. So that's essentially the first section of chapter 4. We discover that the postmasters that came before were found dead, and there's something weird going on in the post office, but it only gets weirder. So in section 2 of chapter 4, Moist and Groat with Pump. This is actually a pretty fun scene here. So Moist and Groat with Pump, remember the golem, Pump, the stone golem, they're walking through the city and they go to a barber shop. And on the barber shop, they see a sign that says Hugo's. Sorry, words are hard. Hugo's. But there's no apostrophe. So very observant that Moist notices that those are the missing letters from the post office. So I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in the last episode, but yeah, the post office has missing letters, and they find it on this barbershop, which is for women too, which I don't think that really matters much, but it's on the store. Clearly someone took it off the post office, the decaying post office, and put it on their own business to save money. So Moist, this is where he uses his people skills, his like con man trickster skills, goes into the barbershop and confronts the receptionist, the woman working there, and he's like, "Hey, can I talk to the owner of the store?" Eventually, she's like, "He's busy," and he's like, "Oh, I've got some very good news." He just basically manipulates his way into this conversation, and then there's like this speak tube where they like talk through the tube, and I guess the owner of the store, I forgot his name, Hugo something, he's on the top, and I guess he's like talking with this guy. It doesn't really explain the exact words he used to convince him to give him the letters, but basically he said, "Hey, I'm the new postman that works for Lord Veterinary. I work for this guy. You don't want bad trouble. Surely this was an accident. Basically like mafia style." So what happens is he gets them to let them take the letters back. Pump rips the letters off with a crowbar, because I forgot to mention that, but the end of section 1, Moist is like, "Hey, Groat, we're gonna go for a walk in the city, and Pump, bring your crowbar." So he knew like this is gonna happen. He knew this was his plan. It's not like they just randomly came across this sign. I think Moist saw this sign and wanted to show Groat. So yeah, Pump took the letters off, and Groat was like, "How are you going to pay for this? How are you going to pay because it's going to be expensive to get, you got to get men to like go up and put the letters back on the post office. And sure enough, Moist got some money from the Hugo guy, the barbershop guy, because clearly he was caught, you know? And so this is a scene where we see Moist use his abilities for the good, I would say, you know? He kind of, I mean, the guy was in the wrong. He obviously took the letters from the post office. So, you know, he kind of manipulated him into giving them up, which is, you know, I think is fair. When he did something wrong, he should give them up. So yeah, we see Moist kind of use his abilities for the good. He did it for the sake of the post office and not for himself. You could argue that maybe he was like making a scene for Groat to see that he means business. You know, in a way, this could be a deeper manipulation of like pretending like you care about the post office and doing this mission or whatever, getting these signs, these letters back, and making Groat believe that you're truly dedicated into improving the post office, but where in reality he's still trying to figure out how he can get out of this mess. So I thought that was a pretty funny scene. It was a pretty fun scene to read, especially when he was like talking to the hostess of that barbershop or the receptionist or whatever. It just, you know, it was just, he was making like a big scene and stuff. It was fun read in that scene. And then section 3. So section 3 starts of chapter 4. It starts with the crewmen they're on the roof putting up the letters into the wording of the post office. And what I thought was really weird, so actually, okay, I'm sorry, I got a little confused there. The beginning of section 3 is Pump ripping the signs off, the letters off of the barbershop, and explaining that this Hugo guy's giving them money so they can afford workmen to put up the signs. Sorry, I misremembered there. That's why I take notes. But the letters were being put back onto the office, and there was a crowd watching. This is where I thought was really strange. I don't think this is like has anything to do with the story or anything, but I found it kind of strange and kind of sickly funny. But there's a crowd watching, and it says, just in case there's a suicide. So as soon as they see men on a roof of a building, a crowd starts to form just in case there's a little entertainment in a suicide. I thought that was really dark and strange, and I kind of laughed at it, and I was kind of like, what? You know, like, what is going on here? So the crowd dispersed, of course, when they finished the sign, and the sign's back together. And this is where Groat has an emotional moment. And this is strange. Groat has an emotional moment and tells Moist to walk away from the job. He goes, you know, don't do this. You don't have to do this post office thing. And that's where Moist is like, no, you don't get it. I have to do this post office thing, because Moist hasn't told Groat that, you know, he's being punished essentially because, you know, he was a prisoner. He got caught being a con man. And Moist is like, you're a good man. You know, you are a good man trying to fix this post office when you really don't have to be. You could just go off and do your own thing. And, you know, Groat doesn't know that it's either this or die for Moist. So, but anyways, if you guys remember in the last podcast, in a previous chapter, Moist had a letter in his pocket. Now he randomly read a letter. It was a love letter. Someone professing their love for someone, and he put it in his pocket, and he kind of just remembered about it, and he took it to the grocery store because the owner was the person who was supposed to receive that letter, and then he delivers the letter. So we mentioned that in the last podcast. Well, we get to a payoff here from that event. Not only did it feel good for Moist to actually deliver the letter, but that Antimony, I think his name is, Antimony Parker is his name. The person who has delivered the letter confronts Moist and thanks him. So at first it's a bit awkward. He walks up, you know, so they're out there outside in front of the post office. He walks up, this Parker guy, and he's kind of like in his face, and Moist is like, uh-oh, is this confrontation? Probably because he's mostly used to confrontation because he scams people, right? So he doesn't know what to expect, but finds out that Parker is thanking him because with the letter, it aided him in helping him find a lost love. So remember that Parker had children, and Moist was thinking, well, maybe they got married anyways, even though this letter wasn't sent to him. And, the letter wasn't sent to him, but somehow he still was able to hopefully find this person and start a family with this lady. That's actually not the case. So he actually never gets together with this initial love interest, the girl who wrote the letter, right? So he hooks up with a different woman, has a family. What happens is the Parker guy's wife dies, and also his original love interest, the person who sent the letters, husband dies. And through this letter, he's able to find this woman, and they end up planning a wedding. They're like engaged. So this letter, even though it was late, it did some sort of redeeming where you have these original lovebirds, I guess, that came together thanks to the letter, and they're so happy they invite Moist to be part of the wedding ceremony. And Moist is like, okay, like he's just kind of like thrown off by this entire conversation. And yeah, it was a pretty funny read. And yeah, so it was pretty cool. It was a cool little scene there. And Moist is just kind of like, I don't know what the heck's going on. Like, this is crazy. So I think this kind of like helped him see that, maybe he could be an actual post office leader, not just pretending to be until he figures out a way to get out of this. Maybe he can legit save the post office. So I thought that was a fun scene. And then there's a big crowd while this conversation is happening. People are like, a letter was delivered. People are here over, like they eavesdrop and they hear like, oh my God, a letter was delivered. As Parker, this Antony Parker guy, sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name, is having a conversation with Moist. The people are like, whoa, the post office is back in business. And this woman goes up to Moist, and she mentions that there's a curse. She's like, I thought there was a curse in the post office. And Grote gets mad at the lady and kind of like yells at the lady. It was a weird scene, and it was, this kind of continued to pique my interest because, at this point, we've already heard multiple times that there's weird stuff going on in the post office. And the fact that the common people know of a supposed curse that's in the post office, I thought that was pretty strange. And Grote getting so upset was also kind of like revealing. I don't know if Grote was upset because he's been trying to hide it or he knows something more about it. But he gets mad and snips at the lady. I don't know what the right term there. He gets mad at the lady, and he says, hey, shut your mouth, or what. I don't know exactly what he says, but this actually makes Moist upset. And he's like, Grote, what do you do? Why are you yelling at people? And so he drags him into the post office to get away from the crowd and to punish him, to reprimand him for yelling at a civilian. It doesn't make him look good, right? Doesn't make the post office look good. So Moist is mad at Grote and is yelling at him inside, of course. And then Stanley is there in the background and hears Moist yelling at Grote. And remember, I use Moist and Lipwig. So his full name is Moist von Lipwig, just to avoid confusion. Sometimes I call him Lipwig, sometimes I call him Moist. It's so weird to call someone Moist. But he's yelling, and Stanley hears this, and Stanley gets mad and gets defensive about Groot. Grote. That's his name. These are unique names. It is a fantasy. It's just funny because Stanley has a pretty common name. Anyways, he gets upset at Moist yelling at Groat, and he actually has something, a kettle in his hand, ready to attack Lipwig, Moist, as he's yelling. But to be fair, it's more than just yelling. He's like holding up Groat. He's like legit angry at Groat. And then Groat's like, hey, buddy, to Moist. This is Groat to Moist. He's telling him, hey, you might want to calm down. Stanley's back there, and he's got a kettle in his hand. And so, of course, Moist, the anger kind of goes, that momentary anger. He puts him on the ground. He dusts his, oh my God. He redoes his like little uniform. He's like, okay, well, he tries to calm the situation is what I'm trying to say. Words are hard for me today, I swear. But yeah, he calms the situation, and this is where things get really interesting. So while Groat is placed back on the ground and the situation diffuses and nobody's really mad anymore, Moist sees Pump, the golem behind Stanley with his arm up. And Stanley turns around and looks at Pump with his arm up, and he goes, what are you doing with your arm up? And the golem goes, oh, I was asking a question. I had a question, so I raised my hand. And then, of course, Stanley walks away, Groat walks away, and so we have a conversation between Pump and Moist, and Moist is saying, hey, you were gonna hit him, weren't you? Well, you were gonna utterly crush him with your clay fist of justice. And yeah, and of course, Pump explains that his job is to protect Lipwig, and he felt that he was, there was a threat, which, because Moist is like, I thought you can't hurt people, and he's like, well, I can defend people. And then, how I mentioned that Pump is like an AI? He's just kind of like a soulless robot. Obviously, there's something way more deeper to this character, because Pump starts breaking down, like, all of a sudden, like, analyzes the character of Moist. Like, he just talks about, like, how killing is wrong. And Pump just straight up says, you've killed people. And Moist is like, what? Huh? I've never killed anybody. And it's important to note that, because even in the beginning of the story, Moist says he doesn't like using violence and he doesn't use any weapons. He just uses his wit. And Pump's like, yeah, you've killed people. He's like, what are you talking about? I've never killed anybody. And then Pump explains that when you rob people and steal from them and abuse them, it brings them potentially to an early grave. Like, your actions do have consequences, and, it could lead them to suicide. It could lead them to self-destructive behavior because they lost wealth or whatever. They got robbed. They feel, they've got cheated and they're upset about it. So yeah, it's like, there is some truth in that from Pump explaining, like, his character analysis of Moist. Like, you think you're wholesome, you think you're some Robin Hood or something, but you're just robbing from good people that could send them to an early grave, even if it wasn't your intention. And yeah, I thought that scene was really interesting, because like, I just didn't expect that from Pump 19, Mr. Pump, the golem, because he always just kind of says the basic stuff. So that was a pretty interesting scene. So there was some big character development there with Moist, how he went from a trickster who did it for himself, really, but thought he was an okay person because he wasn't really hurting anyone, to then using his abilities to help the post office, and then having an eye-opening experience with Pump telling him that his actions do in fact hurt people. And I guess he never really looked at it that way. So that was a pretty cool scene, and that's actually how chapter 4 ends. So that was awesome. That was pretty cool. So I enjoyed that chapter a lot. But guys, chapter 5 gets a whole lot crazier. We get to have some mysteries solved here, and some new mysteries begin. and some weird, and I'm talking weird Shining type stuff. You guys ever see The Shining? It's the Stephen King book turned into a movie. It's not as scary as The Shining, but some weird stuff happens, which we'll talk about soon. But before we do have an ad. No, I'm just kidding. We don't have an ad. There's no ad. But I will say that there is. So those of you guys who are reading the book, or even just listening and not really reading, but just kind of listening to the story and the book talk, they made a movie out of this book, and it's on YouTube. Someone posted it in the Fireside Book Club Discord, and they posted the movie. So when I finish this book, I'm gonna have. It would be kind of fun to do a movie night. I might announce a movie night a little bit later on the Discord. I think that would be pretty fun to kind of celebrate the finishing of the book and kind of seeing a movie form of it and seeing different scenes, kind of come alive in a movie. So that'd be pretty cool. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on to chapter 5. Now, with chapter 5, I did just read it today, so it's pretty fresh in my mind. I did not take any notes. But let's just I should remember everything here. Oh, you know what? One thing I forgot to mention in the first episode, there's a cat in this story. His name is like Tiddles or something. I'm drawing a blank on him. I kind of forgot him again because I put a little mental note to mention the cat, but there's this old cat that has a daily routine and does it every day, and you kind of have to move out of his way. He takes a certain path every day, and you kind of have to move out of his way so he can do his daily routine. Because there's one scene where I think it's in chapter 4, maybe chapter 4, I think. Yeah, chapter 4, maybe not. But there's a scene where Grote is like, "Oh, it's 5 o'clock." And then he opens the door and the cat comes into the room. So like Grote is well aware of the daily routine of this cat. I don't know what this is. I don't know how it's important to the story. It's just something that goes on, and I forgot to mention it in the last episode. Anyways, so we're at chapter 5, and this is where we kind of have like a dialogue with Grote. There's a, like, Grote is kind of talking to himself about, because what happens is that Moist promotes Grote to be like a senior post office worker, and he takes that to heart. He's like, really? Because he was always called a junior, and he always wanted to be a senior since ever, and it's like so important for him. Because in this dialogue at the beginning, like the first section of chapter 5, he just talks about like if he dies and he's in the afterlife, and what would his family say if he was never promoted to senior? They would make fun of him. He would be nothing. So it's clearly something that's very important to him. And then he says, this is really weird in the dialogue. He goes, when talking about Moist, he goes, he can try walking the walk. He said, no one can argue if he walks the walk. And then I can tell him everything, so it'll be all right. And if he don't walk in the end, then he ain't postmaster material anyways. And that was weird, because I was like, what the heck? Walk the walk? Usually when you say, can he walk the walk? It's like, can he actually do what he says he can do? And that's what I thought first reading it, but we'll soon discover later in this chapter, walking the walk is something entirely different. And clearly Grote is hiding some secrets about the post office that he has not told Moist about. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Stanley was in this scene too, but he was just polishing his pins or whatever. And of course, Grote has some idea. He says, this is what he says. The same paragraph. And if you don't walk in the end, he ain't postmaster material anyway. He goes, Stanley? Stanley awoke from a dream of pins. Yes, Mr. Grote? Got a few errands for you to run, lad. And if he ain't postmaster material, and this is what he's thinking in his head, Grote added in the privacy of his creaking brain, I'll die a junior postman. So basically, his promotion. See, this was a little clue for what's going to happen later on the chapter. Moist promotion of Grote to be senior, and he kind of just did it for Grote to shut up. Wouldn't matter if Moist can't walk the walk. What does that mean? We'll find out soon enough. So in the next chapter, this is where we get some interesting. We get the perspective of those businessmen. So remember at the end of the last episode of this podcast, episode 2, we ended it with a conversation between Lord Veterinary and the businessmen, the investors who run these big clacks towers that relay messages really quickly through semaphore techniques of lights, shutters, flags. They relay messages, and there's these towers all over the place. And these businessmen are like the ones who run it, and they make a lot of money. But we get Crispin Horsefry. Now, Crispin Horsefry is the fat one. I say that only because it was mentioned in the book. Like, this guy was like fat and aggressive, and he was younger amongst the businessmen in this meeting with Lord Veterinary. Well, he actually goes to the door of Mr. Gilt. Gilt, Gilt. So Gilt, he was also a businessman who was at that meeting, and he's like an older fellow. He has an eye patch. I believe he has a beard as well, long hair. So he goes to his house, and he starts telling him like, oh, I'm being followed. And remember, Mr. or Lord Veterinary does say he wants this Horsefry guy to be investigated. So he goes to this guy's he's got a big house, he's a rich business, big cat, fat cat kind of guy, big house. And he's having like a party or like a meeting with some other people. And Horsefry walks in, he's talking to his butler named Igor. And he has a lisp. So this whole scene was really funny. He was like, yes, sir. Like everything he said had like a lisp in it. Anyways, eventually Gilt shows up and starts talking to him. And he's like trying to calm him down. He gives him some alcohol, and that's honestly by design. So he gets him drunk and a little bit more controllable in terms of his anxiety of being followed. And what was most important about this scene is that Gilt is very calm and collective, and they are clearly doing something illegal, something bad, because Horsefry is saying stuff like, we're going to get caught, this is bad. Lord Veterinaries, he's going to find out. So something's going on. It's never really discussed what exactly, but Horsefry mentions that he's written all of their ideas and dealings in a book. And Gilt is like, bro, you wrote this all in a book? Clearly that's like evidence of them doing something bad. So he takes the book, Mr. Gilt, which is such a funny name, Gilt. He takes the book from Horsefry. He's like, let me hold on to this, okay? Let me hold on to this because you don't want this being discovered. And then he takes Igor, and at this point, Horsefry is completely drunk, like really drunk, because he had a bunch of like whiskey, I believe. So Igor gets the coach, takes him home, drops him off, comes back, and then it mentions that Igor, when he's coming back home to Mr. Gilt's house, he puts the horse away, puts the coach away, and then he puts a silver ring on a plump pigeon. And these are no mere disease roof rats of the city. These are he selected a particular fat one, expertly slipped a silver message ring around its leg and tossed it up into the night. So I don't know if Igor is working with Gilt or he's got his own plans, but he just sent a messenger pigeon with some sort of message on it. And yeah, and he said more pork. Remember the city more pork. More pork pigeons were quite bright, for pigeons stupidly had a limited life in the city. This one would soon find Mr. Grail, it's Gryle, Grail, his rooftop lodging, but it annoyed Igor that he never got his pigeons back. So that's how that ends. So the butler sends some sort of message to Mr. Greil, and the pigeons never come back. So that's all we know. So who knows what that's going to lead to? And maybe Igor's got a mind of his own. But guys, things get even weirder here. So in this next section, this is where Moist is exploring the post office. So he actually goes exploring, and he's going up stairways. Actually, first he discovers a coach station where they store like a coach and a horse, and it's still functional. He still sees a horse is there. He still sees a coach. So someone's taking care. I think they still use it for passengers. So I think this coach is for delivering mail, at least originally, but now they just use it for passengers so they can, I guess, keep making money and keeping up with the horse in this coach that they have here at the post office. But anyways, he keeps exploring the post office, and this is where things get really weird. So he's walking up the stairs, and every new level of stairs, he's like opening the doors, and letters are like pouring out. And it's like so bad. It's like a dam opening of these letters because they're all just stored on all these, they're just letters stored everywhere. There's letters everywhere. And when he's going up here, eventually, if I'm not mistaken, and I could have, like, this was like a tough scene to read because there's some illusions going on here. But he's going up here, and the stairs give out, and he has to like climb up into the next level, and then he's walking down, and then he looks behind him, and he sees just carpet and hallway where there once was stairs. And he's thinking, what the heck? Like, I just climbed up some stairs. How is there now a hallway with carpet where there were stairs? So he leans down and he brushes his hand on this new carpet that came out of nowhere, and he notices that his hand goes right through it, and is a sense of coldness, as if there's nothing there. And so that's how one of the former postmasters died. They saw carpet and floor, but really it was stairs. So it's just an illusion. So the post office is doing this weird illusion of the past. And that's why it's kind of reminded me of The Shining. Because The Shining, that's kind of what happens. The main character, Jack, forgot his name, but he sees a past of the hotel. Or in this, he's finding a past in the post office. And eventually he keeps walking, and then he finds a balcony, and then he checks. He's like very careful when he's walking because he doesn't want to walk and fall because everything's just an illusion. And he checks, and he feels, and the balcony's not really there. So that's how another post office, former post leader office member died. He walked onto a fake balcony and fell. And so from this balcony, he's not on it, he's just near it, and he's looking down, and he sees the past of the post office. He sees it, he sees the post office in its glory days. He sees like a busy crowd, that big hall. I don't know if I really mentioned this in the last episode, but there's a big hall in the center of the post. That's where people come in and drop off their mail and pick up their mail. It's just busy. There's people everywhere. There's workers everywhere. The pigeon poop is gone. There's a beautiful golden statue of like a god with like wearing a helmet with wings, and he's like in motion. It's like a very glorious looking golden statue of him like delivering mail. And it's this like prestigious, beautiful post office that had so much glory. And he's seeing this vision, and then he sees like the workers come out, and they're like pristine uniforms, and they have this commander who's like, screaming attention and stuff. And like, it's just this very like respectable, this very respected job of being a post office, delivery man. And they had these beautiful uniforms. And as he's seeing these visions, he's reminded of what Grote described the post office. So earlier in the book, Grote had described the post office of what it was like in its glory. And he's reminded of what Grote said So he's thinking of what Grote said as he's viewing this image of the post office being in its glory days. So this is where, Moist is like, okay, I'm here in the now, but I'm seeing the then. So it's a big illusion, and it's just like what the post office was. And this was just a really weird scene. Anyways, as he's done looking at the big hall of, from the balcony, looking into the post office, he turns and then he sees, if I'm not mistaken, like somebody, like a ghost of a person walks through him. And he said it was a very horrible experience. And this is how the third former postmaster died, is this ghost walked through him, and I guess it gave him a heart attack or something and just made him drop dead in fright. That's what he said. He died in fright because this ghost that came out of nowhere was just like a horrible, it said the sensation was unpleasant, like a sudden snap of fever. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was seeing someone's head walk through yours. The view is mostly gray with traces of red and hollow hints of sinus. You would not wish to know about the eyeballs. So yeah, and then so what happens is Moist follows this ghost into a room. He goes in the room. The room is an illusion. He falls through the floor. He's like surrounded by letters. And this is where things get weirder. He's surrounded by letters. And then all of a sudden, he's like falling, and then the weight of these letters, he's like falling through multiple floors. He's flowing with the letter. He's just surrounded by letters. All of a sudden, he starts seeing blue writing appear. Let's see, what does it say? Appear in his like inner mind or something. It appears in his mind. He literally is seeing blue letters, right? And it's just the first one, and he hears voices. So this is the voices that Grote and Stanley were talking about. The letters are talking. The letters are speaking. There's this magical ability that these letters have. And the first one is like, "Dear Mother, blah, blah, blah." And then the other one's like, they're just like little random notes and letters that he's hearing while he's just being surrounded by this mail. And so he's just like, he has like a total freak out moment, like, what is going on? This is crazy. But eventually, as he's like falling through this mail, a big hand grabs his leg and pulls him out. And of course, that's Pump who gets him out of there. And he's explaining to Pump, he's like, the letters are alive and they want to be delivered. They're demanding to be delivered. And Pump's just like, yep. And he's like, no, seriously, the letters are alive and they're speaking to me. And he's like, yeah, they want to be delivered. It's like, I don't know if Pump believes him or he's just like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. So that is kind of where that section ends. But yeah, that was crazy. Just like, that was an interesting section where he's climbing through the post office and the floors are like, it was just eerie to see the old post office in its glory, and it was beautiful. And now it's just a dark, dusty, stale, full of letters that need to be delivered, pigeon poop everywhere, and just run down. So it was almost like the post office was testing him, showing him what it could be, what it could become again, and he kind of survived the test, where the other postmasters, they fell, they died, whatever. He survived it, but there's another test, and this is how this chapter ends. He has to go through like a ritual. So out of nowhere, this is where things get weird. And I was like, what is going on? So after just falling through some letters and stuff, these old gentlemen come up with wearing old like post office uniforms. And they say, "Are you the unfranked man?" And he's like, "What? The unfranked man?" He's like, "Yeah, answer the question, And he's like, "Fine, sure, whatever. I'm the unfranked man." They put like a black fabric over him and, just like a hood over him so he can't see. And they force him to go through like a ritual. And Moist is kind of like, "Oh, I've been through this before. They're just trying to scare me. They're not going to actually hurt me. Just go through the motions and get this over with so I can complete the initiation into being a postmaster." And that's what it is, like a proper rite of passage to be the proper. And this is walking the walk. And they literally call it that. He's going to walk the walk. And it's just like a big delivery man ritual to see if he can actually be the postmaster. And so, yeah, that's what he does. Now, Groat is there. So Groat grabs him by the elbow and he's like, don't you worry, Mr. Lipwig, just listen to my command. We'll get this over with. This is no big deal. And he's like, yeah, this is all just a joke, right? And he's like, yeah, you'll be fine. He's like, yeah, I'll be fine, right? He's like, what's the worst that could happen? He's like, well, you could break some bones, be crippled, and end up not being chosen for the postmaster. And he's like, wait, are you serious? Like, so now he's having like legit anxiety about this. Like, wait, can I actually get hurt doing this ritual? So he's blindfolded. He hears voices, like many voices around him. And essentially they put him through like trials. He has to put on these heavy boots. I think he walks on a skateboard and he trips and falls and hits his chin. Then they put on a heavy sack on him and they pour water on him, basically making him go through like hardcore delivery mail. Like no matter what comes your, because the beginning of the sign, when he sees the sign, it's like it doesn't matter if like rain, sleet, snow, we will deliver. That's basically what they're doing, but inside the post office. They're like forcing him to go through this trial and error, or this trial of obstacles, and if he succeeds, he'll be the postmaster. Well, anyways, what was most interesting about this was the last task he had to do was find a little mail slot. You know how doors have a little slot opening that you can open and shove mail into? He has to find that and put the mail in there. Well, he takes his hood off of his eyes because he remembered that one of the old men had missing fingers, and he realized that this is probably where you lose fingers. And so he puts the fabric around his fingers as he opens the slot, throws the mail in, and I guess like the slot is like razor sharp and rips the fabric off instead of his fingers. And they were basically like, hey, you cheated, you can't do that. And there's this really funny moment where Groat, because like in the book they call him like, what do they call him? Hold on, I gotta find this, because there was this really funny moment that just like de-escalated the whole situation. Yeah, the worshipful master was this voice. So there's this voice sounding all epic, and he's like, now you must do the trial of, whatever. And he called himself the worshipful master. And then Groat eventually gets mad at him because he's like breaking the rules or something. And Groat's like yelling him and then calls him out by name. And he's like, hey, bro, like that's not part of the rules. And then the worshipful master like sounds less intimidating. He's like, what are you talking about? It's just funny. You have this like bickering about this, like, this is supposed to be some ancient ritual. And it's like, they're over there bickering and talking about the rules and stuff. And Moist is just like, what is going on? Like, this is so stupid. But anyways, he succeeds. And then they're like, all right, one more challenge, one more test. And if you survive this, then you're truly the official postmaster of the post office. And then Groat's like, oh, I'm really sorry about this. This is unfair. He's cheating, but good luck, and hands him a whistle in his hand. And so what they do is they release a bunch of dogs on him. So again, representing mailmen, mailmen being chased by dogs, the typical cliche. And these dogs are called lip wigsers. It's like a special breed, and they're all trained. This breed of dog, it's a very vicious dog that can like bite through people's legs. So like, yeah, Lipwig legit could have died here against these dogs apparently. But Lipwig knows that these dogs, they all are trained to listen to certain commands. So basically, it's like schlatt. Schlatt is the word to like stop and to sit. So Moist tells these dogs that are running into the room right now. And keep in mind, this room is dark. There's barely any torches. It's like they're trying to do this spooky ritual. And it's funny when he describes the scene. It's like, okay, here's your last trial. And then he says he hears all the the members of this ritual like scurry away and close doors, and then they release these dogs. And then of course he controls the dogs, tell them to sit, and they all come back and they're like, what the heck? Like, how did you do that? How did you tell those dogs to stop? And he's like, well, he explains it, and he's like, okay, well, you're the post office master now. Like, you did it. And yeah, so it was just a big ritual of these old timers, and I guess Pump finds the old postmaster's hat, which has wings on it, and there's a moment where he's putting the hat on because the old timers who did this ritual, they're like, you may be the postmaster, but you're not going to save the post office. We've done this before with multiple people, and it never works out. And Moist is like, well, you never know. And he puts the hat on, and then all of a sudden the letters start going crazy. The letters are flying around in the room, and it was just, it was a interesting scene because once again he sees writing on the wall, and it's the letters. It goes, Moist von Lipwig, it wrote. And he said, yes. And he goes, you are the postmaster. So remember, these are the letters speaking to him because they're going crazy. Once he put on this hat, the letters are going crazy. So it's like official, like it truly is official. Because look, I'm not the one you're looking for, said Moist. And Moist von Lipwig, at a time like this one, you will do. But I'm not worthy. Acquire worth with speed. Moist von Lipwig, bring back the light. Open the doors. Stay not the messengers about their business. In the beginning was a word, but what is a word without a messenger? Moist von Lipwig, you are the postmaster. And he goes, I'm the postmaster? Or he goes, I'm the postmaster. Like he's like fully accepted it, And the mail must move. Moist von Lipwig, too long have you been bound here? So it's like it's official, like things are about to get going here. It's almost like the post office itself has accepted Lipwig into being the postmaster. So this was and that's how the chapter 5 ends. And so chapter 6 we'll save for the next podcast, but so of course I just kind of summarized the whole story. We didn't really talk, but now that we've kind of summarized it, I kind of explained how I thought about certain things and stuff. Let's go ahead and analyze like what the heck just happened. So this was like the coming, not a coming to age, but like this was like Moist, you know how they call it imposter syndrome? They feel like they don't deserve or they don't belong. I feel like this was him overcoming that, where he saw that he had certain skills that would help him achieve success at the post office. So yeah, it was a great set of chapters that mostly focuses on Moist and his work at the post office, him exploring the post office. Another thing that I forgot to mention is that when he's walking around the post office, before he starts going up the stairs and he has those visions, that illusion, he did say that the post office also had a Clacks tower. So, and he's like, why does the post office have a Clacks tower? I don't know. I think soon he might go up there and explore it and see what's up. Because I think someone's working it up there. I think that's what he said. I just feel a little overwhelmed because there's just so much going on in this dang book that it's hard to like get every little detail, because the book is fairly short relative to how much stuff is going on, and it happens so quickly. It's easy to miss stuff. So hopefully I've gotten everything covered there. But so far I really enjoyed this book. I mean, I never thought I'd be so intrigued by a post office book. But of course, with like the mysteries going on, you've got the dynamic with the businessmen and Lord Veterinary, who's like watching these businessmen. They're up to no good, and you're trying to figure out what's going on, and you're kind of rooting for Moist to be successful here. and get the post office up and running again, because it's kind of sad, especially when you read the part where he has the vision of the glory days, and it was like kind of beautiful, and that's kind of gone now. So, and that's ruined by technology, and there is a little bit of that where technology can ruin beautiful things, and that, you know, we see more of that theme in these two chapters. So it's been really fun to read this so far, and I can't wait to see what happens. I really can't wait to see, like, when he starts to get the post office going again, how he's going to deal with these letters, how to get them out of the post office quickly. Is he going to hire more people? Is he going to come up with a new system to get mail out faster than these messaging towers that the whole city is littered with? So we'll find out, but this has been a really good read so far. Again, any critiques or criticisms about the podcast episode, please share. Just trying to constantly improve. I'm a bit new when it comes to book talk stuff, so I'm always like, don't know 100% what I should do. Should I summarize everything? Should I delve deeper into whatever? Let me know, and let me know what you also like about these podcasts so I can continue to do it. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up here for this episode. Remember, guys, to join the Discord. Also, leave a good review if you enjoy the podcast. It helps a lot. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. Going Postal. Don't forget to join the Discord, because we are going to have a big Halloween episode coming up. And if you have a fun, scary story that you, of course, needs to be original from your own mind, don't, steal someone's story, but submit your stories, and I'm excited to read them. So yeah, we'll wrap it up here, guys. Nice hour-long episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one. And remember, we're going to do 2 chapters at a time now. So we'll do 6 and 7 next, and at that point, we'll be halfway through the book, which is crazy because there's 14 chapters in the book. So it already feels like we're kind of halfway just based on looking at the pages. But yeah, pretty cool stuff, guys. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.